Long time no see. I'm Chris, aka the Philosopher's Games, and this series analyzes the Lord of the Rings book and compares it to the films, working out differences but also explaining all the details and connections to the lore. We are still in Rivendell in the chapter Many Meetings of the Fellowship of the Ring. In the corresponding film scenes, we see Frodo talking to Gandalf while lying in bed, recovering from his Morgul knife wound. This book chapter adds a ton of very interesting background information. In general, this and the next chapter are extremely exposition heavy. The first film covers some of these details as well, but often at other places to spread the exposition out a bit more and not have too much of it in one section, though the Rivendell section is still exposition heavy in the first film too. First of all, sorry for the long break of the series. Originally, this episode here was planned to be a special episode only about Elrond and his backstory, but my script grew to a length of around 90 to 100 pages, and instead I made it into a standalone character study video called Who is Elrond? It got so detailed and long that I had to split it into multiple parts, in which I covered Elrond in the first age and second age so far, together about 5 hours long. The third age part is at this point still in production and might come out soonish too, though I will split it into multiple parts because producing 2+ hour long videos destroys me. Feel free to check part 1 about Elrond's ancestors and a few years of his youth, and especially part 2 about the complete second age in all its detail, but it's not a requirement to follow the series here, but see it as a very long excursion to add to the series. For example, it covers why Elrond has the gift of foresight, how Rivendell was founded, how he became such an important character in Middle-earth, even how the character changed while Tolkien was writing his books and lore. Basically everything. I will, as a result, skip a dedicated Elrond episode in this series and just mention some details here and there in short. The way I want to cover Elrond is simply too big a topic for the series here, but the Who is Elrond videos are there. Check them out around this episode if you haven't yet and are interested in the topic. Links are in the description. As always, my typical disclaimer, I try to pronounce names as Tolkien described it. Shoutouts to the artists who allowed me to use their amazing artworks, and of course, spoiler warning. We talked about the flood washing the Nazgul away in some of the last episodes. While rereading the chapter, I noticed an interesting detail. Gandalf said, "For a moment I was afraid that we had let loose too fierce a wrath and the flood would get out of hand and wash you all away. There is great vigor in the waters that come down from the snows of the misty mountains." It sounds like they almost lost control over the flood for a moment because they let loose too fierce a wrath. This shows that there seemed to be limits for them to control a flood, but also that they were not stingy when it comes to commanding a power to wash away the Nazgul. Either they simply underestimated the power of the waters, and Gandalf describes the waters from the snows of the Misty Mountains as having great strength, or they really wanted to make a statement towards the Black Riders and summoned the greatest flood possible for them. Though it reads a bit like the first case was true. In episode 21, I think, we discussed how the dark power of the first Dark Lord Morgoth, who infused the whole land mass of the world with it, is almost non-existent in water, according to the book Morgoth's Ring. So the clean waters of the mountains are powerful against the evil forces of a Dark Lord, though water can be defiled by evil creatures, as we know from the Silmarillion. Glaurung, the father of dragons, would be an example. Another interesting detail I talked about in other videos is that the Misty Mountains were once raised by Morgoth himself, according to the Silmarillion and Morgoth's Ring, to hinder the riding of Orome, the Vala or High Angel of Hunting. The Misty Mountains are often a place of misfortune, which might be explained by that. And so it might not be surprising that a flood coming from them is wild and powerful, but also hard to control. In this context, Was the danger of washing Frodo away as well an expression of the mountains being once created by evil to hinder the forces of good? Hard to say, and I might interpret too much into these lines, but the thought remains very interesting and is a testament to Tolkien's world building in my opinion. True or not, enough details exist in the lore to at least think about this. After that scene, Frodo awakes in a bed in Rivendell and talks to Gandalf. The wizard mentions a feast to celebrate the victory later, and Frodo fell asleep quoting the poem line that led to him using the One Ring in the prancing pony. The cow jumped over the moon. After that, Tolkien gives us some small details about Rivendell. It's called the last homely house east of the sea. I guess to imply beyond it and the Misty Mountains, things become wild. Bilbo describes it as a perfect house, whether you like food or sleeping or storytelling or singing or just sitting and thinking best or a pleasant mixture of them all. Merely to be there was a cure for weariness, fear and sadness. In the context of Tolkien explaining that he sees himself as Hobbit in all but size as well in letter 213, I think he wanted to create the ideal place where burdened wanderer can come to rest and recover from his journey. A lot of journeys led people to Rivendell. We will talk about the motives of the other characters coming there in one of the next episodes, but many people come there to rest, be safe and maybe get advice of Elrond, one of the wisest elves of his time. As the Shire can be seen as some kind of anachronism that seems to be not really part of the world, Rivendell in Lord of the Rings feels like a place that exists outside of the troubles of Middle-earth as well. Of course, a reason is for sure Elrond being its lord and his possession of the mightiest elven ring of power, Vilya. The intention and power of the 3 elven rings of power is, according to Elrond, understanding, making and healing to preserve all things unstained. So Elrond is able to create and protect his realm in such a way that the troubles and worries of the world will not enter this place. In a way, this changed by helping Frodo and allowing him to enter with the One Ring, but this also explains why he and the One Ring can't stay there indefinitely. They are safe there, but evil might focus its gaze upon Rivendell. It also speaks for Elrond and his wisdom that he was so welcoming to all, be it elves, dwarves, men, hobbits or wizards, and that he never tried to take the One Ring away from Frodo or keep it for himself, which would have been easy. But he was there over 3,000 years ago, when Isildur took the One Ring against his and Círdan's advice as heirloom and Wergild. He witnessed how dangerous the ring was and as a result knew that danger all too well. Maybe him not claiming the title of High King after the death of Gil-galad, last High King of the Noldor elves, expresses how he was not interested in power, kingship and ruling. I think he learned his lesson long ago and it's even buried deep in his being. He survived the third kinslaying as a child where Noldor elves, the sons of Feanor and their host to be precise, murdered other elves of all clans in what was basically a refuge camp with elves fleeing from the terrible wars of the First Age, just to claim a Silmaril, a gem of 3 of unparalleled power and beauty. Elrond and his brother were separated from their parents, and one of the remaining 2 sons of Feanor, responsible for this unjust attack, became his and his twin brother Elros' foster father. For sure, the sons of Feanor regretted their actions and suffered from it greatly, but still, these deeds were committed, and Elrond saw what happened if you put a desire for one object and power above all. I think as a result, he was not that susceptible for the power of the One Ring. In the evening, Frodo awoke and found green clothes, hard to say word for me, placed in his room for him, which were fitting excellently. Here we have quite a few small differences to the film already. In the film, Sam comes into the room after Frodo awoke and talked to Gandalf. In the book, they meet after he awoke again in the evening and Gandalf is not in the room. It makes sense though that Frodo does not fall asleep again, waking in the evening as in the book, because it would just draw out the bed scene too much, though I guess it feels more plausible to sleep again due to Frodo still recovering and he just awoke for the first time. Of course, the film also does not make it clear if Frodo gets up directly and walks around in Rivendell or if that scene plays much later. Time and space are very fluid in film. I have to admit that my imagination of Rivendell is very influenced by the film, which I saw before reading the books, and in my opinion they did a great job of depicting it. We have this scene with Frodo at this balcony, and we see a lot of these beautiful miniatures and also full-scale set pieces. Still looks awesome. It's really hard to say how big Rivendell really was. We get very little details about that, and as explained, it's an ideal place where often people with powerful fates meet, rest, and get counsel. It's also interesting that a lot of different people seem to agree that if you need advice and knowledge, that's the place to go. Dwarves, elves, men, and even powerful spirit beings like Gandalf go there to seek counsel with Elrond. We know some of several councils were held in Rivendell, or let's say were most likely held there. It's a very special place in the world, and I assume Tolkien created it for The Hobbit, where it also had a similar purpose as in Lord of the Rings. Next in the film we see Frodo and Sam meeting Merry and Pippin joyfully, and then an aged Bilbo. We might talk about Bilbo's aging next episode, but it's mostly an invention of the film, though from the book's perspective, Frodo hasn't seen Bilbo for about 17 years, which is not really transported in the films. There it feels like a few months from the birthday party to Frodo reaching Rivendell at most. In this context, though, I really love how Elijah Wood acts when he sees Bilbo. His expression is so joyful that you really believe he has not seen him for 17 years. It's an awesome scene. After that, we have a nice cut to them talking about Bilbo's Red Book, the Red Book of Westmarch. In the Lord of the Rings book, things are a bit different. As said, Frodo awoke in the evening, dressed and looked into a looking glass, noting that he has gotten thinner and that he has seen a thing or two. Frodo also noticed how his arm was already nearly as useful again as it ever had been. Interestingly, mirrors existed even in ancient times of our world, but I still would imagine a more modern version here, like from the Middle Ages or the Renaissance. Again, maybe an indicator of how advanced the elves were. Sam knocked at the door and entered the room. He rushed to Frodo and gently grabbed Frodo's hand, noticing that it's warm while stroking it. Frodo greets Sam saying hello with a U, an alternative British spelling of hello I was not aware of. And in response he explains how Frodo's hand was so cold in the days before. Elrond's efforts not only saved Frodo's life but also restored the functionality of his arm again. This scene for sure has some interpretations, but it definitely shows how worried Sam was and that it's true what Gandalf said, that Sam hardly left Frodo's side and indeed was there even during the nights, always checking Frodo's condition while his friend was unconscious. It's heartwarming knowing that someone is there for you when you are very sick, in this case close to death. I guess in our world it's often close family members that do that, but of those, Frodo only had old Bilbo available in Rivendell, though he is distantly related to Merry and Pippin as well, but you see the point. So his friends, especially Sam, had to step in and care for their friend. The elves cared too, without wanting any compensation, which is very noble. By the way, I love how in the film Elrond says, "Welcome to Rivendell, Frodo Baggins." Still, in my opinion, Tolkien especially underlines two friends here. Sam, as explained, but also Gandalf, who is the first person Frodo spoke to after he awoke. I guess in case of Gandalf, he is also there as expert, observing his medical condition. We discussed already how Gandalf could see more, quote, "But to the wizard's eye there was a faint change, just a hint as it were of transparency about him." So Gandalf takes a position of friend and assistant doctor of Elrond at the same time, in my opinion. It was also Gandalf who sent Sam to Frodo when he woke up again in the evening. Not surprising, because Gandalf often has foresight. Here again, it seems he knew Frodo awoke and, as a result, sent Sam. It does not feel like a coincidence. Sam now led Frodo to the others, and here he met Merry, Pippin and also Gandalf again, but as mentioned, it's evening in contrast to the film scene. We learn some further details as well. For example, it's warm, even at night in Rivendell, and it feels like it's still summer there, though it's the 24th of October. The text passage describes this as unusual, I guess. I could imagine it's Elrond and his Ring of Power that have to do with this. Speaking of rings, Pippin says, "Here is our noble cousin, make way for Frodo, Lord of the Ring." Gandalf intervenes and stops him, saying that he should not name the evil here and that the true Lord of the Ring is in Mordor in his dark tower. Tolkien again establishes Sauron as foe so terrible and powerful you should not even say his name aloud or address him indirectly. Gandalf says something very interesting, quote, "We are sitting in a fortress. Outside it is getting dark." I think with fortress he describes Rivendell as place that exists a bit, as explained, outside of the world, well protected from the power of evil. I don't think he means Rivendell is literally a classic fortress. And maybe talking about the evil might bring evil closer into this region. While they are safe in Rivendell, people outside of it are not. And so talking about the Lord of the Ring could bring doom over others. Also, it maybe has to do with awareness. Gandalf knew of Sauron's terrible war, which, as we know, always brings suffering and despair to the innocent. A topic that also touches us a lot here in Europe in these days. Knowing and foreseeing this, it was probably not the time for jokes like this from Gandalf's perspective. There was still a long and difficult path in front of them. Recognizing this might be impossible for a young hobbit, but Gandalf is very careful here, which shows his wisdom, foresight, knowledge, and maybe compassion for those affected by the times to come. The conversation is interrupted by the ringing of bells. What that means we will discuss in the next episode. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that the next one will not be delayed as much. Sorry for that. I also have some bigger lore projects planned. The next part of the Who is Elrond video covering the Third Age, but also some other bigger lore videos I want to make. I hope I can produce them until September. I also want to stream again on YouTube this month, and I plan some content for the gaming channel as well. So there will be more lore content and a little bit of gaming content. I also try to stream a bit more frequently on Twitch again. If you liked the video, please press the like button, write a comment, and if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe. Maybe even consider pressing the annoying bell. Thank you people for your support and for watching. Goodbye.